The moment my plane touched down in Asheville, North Carolina, I felt it. The heaviness in my chest, the unresolved anger, the lingering disbelief that Gordon would actually attempt something so brazen. I barely let myself settle. After a quick stop at my apartment, I drove straight to the cabin. It was just past dusk when I pulled up the gravel drive, the tires crunching over loose stone. The place looked exactly the same. Our wraparound porch, the wild mint Jenna and I had planted near the steps, the dark outline of the trees wrapping around it like arms. And yet, it felt different, like someone had tried to steal its soul. I stepped inside. The smell of cedar hit me like a memory. Campfire nights, rainy Sunday mornings, coffee and dust. Everything was exactly how we'd left it, which only made Gordon's betrayal sting more. That night, Jenna came by with a bottle of red wine and a thick folder of printed documents. "This is the original co-ownership agreement," she said, dropping the folder on the table. "It's clear. Both signatures are required for any sale. No wiggle room." I nodded, flipping through the papers, my jaw tight. "What about the buyer?" "Still unknown. But I talked to a contact at the county assessor's office. No deed change has been recorded yet. So either Gordon lied and hasn't found a buyer, or the buyer doesn't know this is illegal. Which would mean the sale is either bogus or incomplete," I said. "He's probably trying to cut a backdoor deal." "Exactly." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. He really thinks he can just take it, like he's entitled to whatever he wants. Jenna gave me a look. He's always thought that. But this time, we have the law on our side. The next morning, I didn't wait for Gordon to make another smug phone call. I called him myself. Well, he answered, his voice syrupy. "Look who's back in town." "Cut the nonsense," I snapped. "You tried to sell the cabin, Gordon, without Jenna's signature, without any legal right." He chuckled, the sound sharp and cold. "You always were dramatic. It's not like you even used the place. You're always off on some humanitarian quest in a jungle. That doesn't make it yours." "I was doing what I had to do," he said. "You don't know what kind of pressure I've been under. I pinched the bridge of my nose." "You think that justifies theft?" "It's not theft," he said, suddenly defensive. "It's called initiative. It's called fraud." He was quiet for a beat. "You wouldn't take this to court. Not your own stepfather. Try me." I hung up before he could spew more excuses. Later that day, Jenna and I met with a local attorney, Mia Cordero, who specialized in property law and estate disputes. She read the contract, raised an eyebrow, and said, "He's dead wrong. You've got a solid case. I can draft a cease and desist letter. That should make him think twice before contacting any buyer again." "Please do," I said. "We want to go by the book." Maya nodded. "And I suggest you speak with the real estate agent, too. Whoever agreed to list this property may not be aware of its legal entanglements." That evening, I called the agent Gordon had mentioned in passing weeks ago, Elena Shore, a mid-level broker working out of Hendersonville. When she answered, I introduced myself and explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Oh no," she said immediately. I didn't know there was another owner. Gordon didn't tell you?" "He said he was the sole decision-maker. I asked about documentation, but he was cagey. Said the cabin was already in escrow. I flagged it as suspicious and didn't proceed." "So you didn't finalize anything?" "No. There's been no signed closing. The buyer is waiting for clarification." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Thank you. That probably saved us a lot of trouble. I'll email you everything I have for your records." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the cabin for a long time. The porch creaked as the wind moved through the pines. I remembered sitting out there with my mother, our feet up on the railing, the smell of hot chocolate and wood smoke in the air. She would have hated what Gordon had become, or maybe she always saw it and didn't want me to know. The next morning, Maya emailed the cease and desist letter to Gordon, copying both me and Jenna. It was direct, professional, and unmistakably firm. Any further attempts to sell, market, or transfer ownership of the property would result in legal action. Jenna called not long after. "Think he'll take it seriously? If he doesn't, we escalate. Detective Kenton said he'd take a look if Gordon pushes it further." "Good," she said, "because I'm done playing nice with that man." "So am I." That night, as I stood by the fireplace staring into the glow of the embers, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for a property. I was fighting for everything I'd learned to protect. Boundaries, peace, legacy. Gordon thought I'd be too far away, too distracted to notice what he was doing. But I was here now, and he was about to learn. I wasn't the scared teenager he used to manipulate. I was done letting people like him call the shots. The phone buzzed insistently in my pocket, jolting me out of my focus. I wiped the sweat off my brow and stepped outside the makeshift clinic, where the midday Honduran sun cast long shadows over the dry red earth. The screen lit up with a name that instantly made my stomach tighten. Gordon Tracy. My stepfather. I almost didn't answer. After years of dealing with his schemes, narcissism, and gambling-induced emergencies, I knew calls from him rarely brought anything good. But something inside me, curiosity, or maybe the faint hope that he was finally calling to say something decent, won out. "Hello?" I said, keeping my tone flat. "Marissa," he boomed, far too cheerful. "Just thought you'd want to know. I've sold the mountain cabin." My blood ran cold. "You did what?" "Sold it," he repeated casually, like he was talking about a used lawnmower. "Figured it was time. You're always off saving the world somewhere, and that place was just sitting there. This way I clear my debts. Win, win." I froze on the clinic steps, gripping the phone as though I could crush it in my hand. "You had no right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That cabin wasn't yours to sell." "Relax," he drawled. "I've been managing things while you're off in jungle villages handing out vaccines. Honestly, you'll thank me later." "I'll thank you when hell freezes over." I hung up before he could say another word. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the distant chatter of nurses inside. Then the storm hit me. Rage, betrayal, disbelief. Gordon had finally done it. He'd crossed a line he couldn't come back from. What he didn't know, and what I intended to keep to myself for the moment, was that the cabin wasn't solely in my name. Years ago, I'd added my best friend Jenna Monroe as co-owner when we restored it together. We'd each invested time, money, and heart into that cabin. And legally, neither of us could sell it without the other's consent. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I ducked into the staff lounge and tapped Jenna's name into my phone. She answered on the second ring, upbeat as always. "Hey, world traveler. How's Honduras?" "He sold it," I blurted out. "Who sold what?" "Gordon. The cabin." There was a pause, followed by a sharp inhale. "You're kidding." "I wish," I said bitterly. "Claims he needed the money to pay off some gambling debts. He thinks he can just decide things like that on a whim. But he can't, Jenna said, her voice hardening. That agreement we signed is airtight. He has no authority. I know, I said. That's what's keeping me from completely losing it. I need you to pull up the ownership papers. I'll finish my assignment here and head home as soon as I can. You got it, she said. Now all business. We'll handle this. I ended the call and sat down on the edge of my cot, staring at the phone in my hand, as if it might combust. How could he do this? The cabin wasn't just a structure. It was a sanctuary. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, it was where I'd gone after long deployments. It's where Jenna and I hosted weekend bonfires and wrote future dreams in notebooks by candlelight. It had been my mother's favorite place before she passed, and later, the only place that ever truly felt like home. Gordon, of course, had no such attachment. To him, it was just an asset, a way to buy his way out of the latest poker disaster or debt collector threat. But this wasn't some pawn shop trinket. It was mine, ours. That night, after wrapping up a full day of patient rounds, I sat under a lantern in the field clinic, writing furiously in my journal. I scrawled memories of summers spent hiking with Mom, the smell of pine needles and wood smoke, the first time Jenna and I stripped the cabin's old floors. I needed to remember why I was fighting, because that place was part of my soul, not just my portfolio. The next day, Jenna called again. I found the documents, she said. No preamble. You're right. He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. Good. Do we know who he sold it to? Not yet, she said. I checked the county records. There's no official transfer filed, which means he either tried to do this off the books, or it's still pending. Classic Gordon, I muttered. Always trying to cut corners. What do you want to do? I want to make sure that cabin stays ours, and I want him to know he picked the wrong woman to mess with. I was sorting through old cabin receipts when I heard the knock. It wasn't polite. It was hard, heavy, like someone trying to make a point. I opened the door, and there he was, Gordon Tracy, in the flesh. He looked exactly as I remembered. Tailored coat a size too big, silver hair slicked back like a politician, and that infuriating smirk that always masked something rotten underneath. Well, he said, brushing past me like he owned the place. Look at this. Cozy. I didn't say anything. I just shut the door and watched him stroll into the living room like we were family again, like he hadn't just tried to steal the only place I ever truly loved. He sank into my reading chair, legs crossed, utterly comfortable. You shouldn't be here, I said coldly. I figured we could talk face to face, he replied, picking at imaginary lint on his sleeve. You've always been so emotional over the phone. I folded my arms. There's nothing to talk about. You tried to illegally sell a property that doesn't belong to you. Marissa. He sighed, like I was the irrational one. You're being dramatic again. I did what I had to do. My debts weren't going to pay themselves. So you thought you'd pay them with my cabin? Our cabin, he corrected, raising a smug eyebrow. No, I snapped. You and I never shared this. You didn't build it. You didn't restore it. You didn't sleep on the floor while the pipes were getting replaced or haul firewood in the snow. That was me. And Jenna. Not you, he scoffed. So self-righteous. You think you're above needing help just because you fly off to save the poor in foreign countries? This has nothing to do with my work, I shot back. This is about you being a liar, a manipulator, and a thief. His face darkened. Don't push me, Marissa. I raised you. You inserted yourself into my life after Mom died, and you used every chance you got to take control of it. But I'm not 15 anymore." For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Anger? Maybe both. "You wouldn't really take me to court," he said, voice low. "You wouldn't ruin your own family." I took a step forward. "Try me." He stood up fast, knocking over the side table. "You always thought you were better than everyone. And you always thought the rules didn't apply to you." Without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I called Jenna immediately. "He showed up here," I said, pacing the cabin. Tried to spin some story about doing it for survival. "He's still acting like it was his right." Jenna groaned. "What a narcissist. What did you say?" "I told him we have the paperwork. That he has no legal claim. Well, he's rattled. And good. I just got off the phone with Maya. She sent the cease and desist letter this morning, and we have a consultation set up with Detective Kenton tomorrow, if he so much as breathes on that cabin again." "Let's do it," I said. "I'm done playing defense." That evening, I compiled everything: emails, text messages, the notarized co-ownership agreement, even Gordon's handwritten note to the buyer, claiming sole ownership. It was sloppy. His signature looked rushed, desperate. The next morning, we met Detective Kenton, a calm, sharp-eyed man in his early 50s. He listened, took notes, reviewed the documents quietly. "Looks like you've got a solid case," he said at last. "If this buyer moves forward, it could be considered attempted fraud. But we can intervene before that happens." "What about Gordon?" Jenna asked. "Technically, if he signed documents falsely claiming ownership, he could be liable for criminal misrepresentation. We'll notify the buyer and hold the transaction. If Gordon continues, we'll escalate." I felt a rush of adrenaline. "Thank you, Detective. We want to move forward." That afternoon, Elena Shore, the real estate agent, called me back. "I flagged the transaction again," she said. "The buyer had concerns. After I told them about your claim, they backed off immediately. Didn't want to be involved in a potential lawsuit. Can you send confirmation?" "I just did. Email with documentation is in your inbox." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my laptop screen. Everything was there: the false listing, Gordon's forged seller disclosure, and the timeline that proved we were right. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames finally giving me comfort again. It had been days since I'd slept well, but something was shifting. I could feel it. I wasn't just protecting a cabin anymore. I was reclaiming a life that had been quietly undermined for years. No more guilt. No more second-guessing myself. Gordon had played his last hand, and I had a full deck. Detective Kenton moved quickly. By the next morning, he'd already contacted the buyer, who confirmed they were withdrawing interest after learning the truth. They didn't want to get tangled in any legal dispute, especially not one involving fraudulent ownership claims. The detective's tone when he called was steady, but there was a quiet urgency beneath it. "Miss Hale, we've halted the pending transaction. You and Miss Monroe are still the legal owners. I've flagged Gordon Tracy's activity for further review. If he attempts to initiate another sale, we'll move to file charges." Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by something colder. Gordon wouldn't give up that easily. Sure enough, less than an hour later, I received another call. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he barked, not even bothering with a greeting. "You mean stopping you from committing real estate fraud?" I asked calmly. Yeah, I do. You're ruining everything, he snapped. I had a buyer lined up, a full cash offer, and now it's dead because you had to stick your nose where it didn't belong. It's my property, I reminded him. I didn't stick my nose anywhere. I defended what was mine. You're so ungrateful, he spat. I stepped in when your mom was sick, kept this family together. You inserted yourself, I interrupted. You manipulated her, then spent the next decade helping yourself to anything she left behind. There was a pause, a sharp breath on the other end of the line. You've always hated me, he said, his voice quieter. From day one. I tolerated you. For her. But she's gone. And so is your access to anything I care about. I hung up, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. For so long, Gordon had operated under the assumption that emotional guilt could shield him from consequences, that I wouldn't risk hurting the family. But what he never understood was, he was never my family. Later that day, Jenna showed up with takeout and a tired smile. Detective Kenton is a rock star, she said, flopping onto the couch. I just got off the phone with Maya. Our cease and desist letter did its job. Gordon tried calling the buyer again this morning, and they reported it. So he's still trying to sell it. Like a man drowning, grabbing at driftwood, Jenna muttered. Maya says this gives us enough evidence to start formal proceedings if we want to press charges. I didn't hesitate. I do. Even if it means going to court. He needs to know I'm not bluffing. Jenna nodded, then raised her plastic fork like a sword. To standing our ground. To standing our ground, I echoed. That evening, I drove out to see my mother's grave for the first time in months. The sun had just dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the cemetery. I knelt beside her headstone and traced the edges of her name. I wish you'd seen what he became, I whispered. Or maybe you did, and you just didn't want to face it. I talked to her for a long time, telling her about Honduras, the cabin, the cease and desist letter, about Jenna's loyalty, about my growing strength. I'm not letting him take anything else, I said finally. Not from me. Not from you. The next morning, Maya confirmed everything was in motion. We'll file a formal complaint, she said. The attempted transaction was enough to prove intent. If Gordon contacts anyone again, or tries to create a new deal, we escalate to criminal court. And if he backs off, he still violated the terms of ownership. We could pursue civil damages, too. I nodded. Let's do it. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing this because Gordon needed to learn something he should have learned a long time ago. You don't get to steal from people who've already lost enough. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother's sister, my Aunt Lynn, who had largely stayed out of family matters since Mom passed. I heard about the situation, she said gently. Gordon's been talking. I'm sure he has, I replied, keeping my voice even. Just be careful, she said. He's spiraling. You know how he gets. I do, which is why I'm doing this. There was silence. Then, I'm proud of you, Marissa. Your mom would be too. That one landed hard. I thanked her and ended the call, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. The next day, a formal letter of intent to investigate was filed with the county. Gordon had been officially named in a property dispute under potential fraudulent intent. And for once, he didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. Just silence. It felt like the eye of the storm. Jenna and I spent the weekend cleaning up the cabin, sorting through old linens, repainting the porch, and fixing the screen door that had squeaked for 2 years too long. It was more than maintenance. It was reclamation. Each brushstroke was a statement. This is ours, not his. That evening we opened a bottle of wine and sat on the porch watching the sunset dip behind the Blue Ridge Hills. "Do you think he'll try again?" Jenna asked. "Probably. People like Gordon don't give up. But now he knows. I fight back." She clinked her glass against mine. "You're not who you were 10 years ago." I nodded, smiling. Not even close. 2 days later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Detective Kenton's voice was steady, but it carried a weight. "Miss Hale, we've completed the preliminary review. Based on the documentation you and Miss Monroe provided, along with statements from the buyer and the real estate agent, we're recommending formal charges against Mr. Tracy for fraudulent misrepresentation and attempted theft of property." My heart beat faster. "So, what happens now?" "We'll notify him. He'll be required to appear in court. The DA will review the case next week. There's strong evidence, especially that forged seller disclosure." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you. You've handled this with strength and clarity. Not everyone can stand up to someone that close." "It was never really close," I said quietly. "Just tolerated." That night, I sat on the cabin porch with Jenna, staring into the quiet woods. The air smelled like pine and rain, and somewhere nearby, a barred owl called through the dusk. I let the silence linger before I finally spoke. "He's going to be charged." Jenna blinked. "Wow, so this is really happening." "Yeah, it's not just a warning this time. No more threats, no more letters. Actual consequences." She nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "Relieved, angry, and kind of sad." "Sad." I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Sad that it had to come to this. That he never learned. That he never tried. Jenna didn't say anything right away. Just let me sit with it. Then finally, maybe he never thought he had to. Maybe no one ever held him accountable before. I looked out into the trees. Well, he does now. The next morning, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I knew before I answered who it would be. "Marissa," Gordon said, his voice low and tense. "I assume you've heard what they're saying." "I've heard the truth, yes." "You're blowing this out of proportion," he hissed. "You're going to destroy my life over a cabin? You tried to steal my home. I raised you." "No," I said sharply. "You inserted yourself into my life after Mom died, then took advantage of every opportunity you could find. You never saw me as family. You saw me as a wallet. And this time, you picked the wrong thing to steal." He went quiet. Then, in a tone I hadn't heard from him in years, almost pleading, he said, "Please, don't take this to court. I'll disappear. I'll leave it alone. Just don't ruin me." I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke slowly, clearly. "You ruined yourself, Gordon." And I hung up. That same afternoon, Maya called. "Good news," she said. "The district attorney is moving forward. Gordon's arraignment is scheduled for the end of next week. We'll file your formal victim impact statement by Tuesday. Do I have to testify? Possibly. But based on what we've submitted, this may not go to trial. He'll likely be offered a plea, especially if he agrees to financial restitution and a formal written admission." I leaned back in my chair, watching the ceiling fan spin slowly above me. "And if he doesn't? Then we go to court. And we win? With this evidence?" Maya chuckled softly. "Yes, we win." Jenna and I spent the next few days gathering every last scrap of documentation. Email threads, text messages, screenshots, notarized forms. We even pulled records from years back, showing how Gordon had repeatedly borrowed from me under the guise of emergency help. It was exhausting, but oddly empowering, like I was untangling myself from years of gaslighting. Each piece of evidence was a knot I was finally undoing. The night before the arraignment, I sat alone in the cabin, the silence pressing in. I thought about all the times I had bit my tongue just to keep the peace. How I'd written Gordon checks because I felt guilty, even when I knew better. How I'd let his condescension slide because he meant well. How I'd held my breath every time I visited, waiting for the next veiled insult, the next dig, the next subtle reminder that he believed he was smarter than me. I wasn't that woman anymore. Not after this. The arraignment itself was uneventful. Gordon appeared via video, looking disheveled and tired. His lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, but the judge allowed the case to proceed. Afterward, I stood outside the courthouse steps with Jenna and Maya. "I think he thought we'd back down," I said, watching the clouds roll in over the mountains. "Most people would have," Jenna replied, "but you didn't." I used to feel bad for standing up for myself. Now I feel free. The call came 1 week later. Detective Kenton's voice was firm, resolute. "Miss Hale, I wanted to inform you that Gordon Tracy has been formally charged with attempted property fraud and fraudulent misrepresentation. The DA has accepted a plea deal. He's agreed to a written admission of guilt and to pay restitution, including covering all legal fees and damages." I sat back, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the wooden beams of the cabin ceiling. Will he serve time? Likely not, unless he violates probation or attempts further transactions, Kenton said. But the conviction will stay on his record, and he's barred from approaching you or the property. A strange wave rolled through me. Relief, but not joy. Validation, but not celebration. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You did what many don't," he replied. "You stood up for yourself. That matters." That evening, I returned to the cabin for the first time since the arraignment. This time, it felt different. I wasn't walking into a battleground. I was coming home. The scent of cedar hit me the moment I stepped inside. The floor creaked the way it always had. But instead of reminding me of what I'd almost lost, it reminded me of what I'd reclaimed. I built a fire in the hearth, poured a glass of wine, and let the quiet settle around me. It had been months since that first phone call from Gordon. Months of legal filings, emotional whiplash, late-night talks with Jenna, and digging through paperwork. And now, finally, it was done. Jenna arrived the next morning, arms full of groceries and paint cans. "You ready for some cathartic renovations?" she grinned. We spent the weekend sanding the porch railings, repainting the shutters a bold forest green, and replacing the broken mailbox Gordon had kicked years ago during a tantrum. It felt good. Physical work with visible results. We planted marigolds along the cabin's path, replaced the old wind chime Mom once hung, and even rehung the photo of me and her, taken when I was 9 and still believed in safety. Every nail we hammered and brushstroke we applied wasn't just maintenance. It was a message. You don't get to take this from me. That Sunday evening, we sat on the porch with mugs of hot cider, watching the sun slide behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. Jenna raised her cup toward me. "To finally being done. To boundaries," I added. "To peace." She nodded. "And to not letting manipulative men define us." We laughed, genuinely this time. Later that night, I got a voicemail from my mother's sister, Aunt Lynn. Marissa, I heard what happened with Gordon. I'm sorry. For everything. I know I didn't speak up much, and maybe I should have. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Your mom would be too. I sat with that for a long time. I knew Aunt Lynn meant it. And even though my mom wasn't here to see it, I believed she'd understand what I had to do. Maybe even feel relieved that I finally stopped carrying the burden she couldn't bring herself to confront. A few days later, Gordon tried one last time. He sent a letter, not from a lawyer, but from himself. Sloppy handwriting, misspelled words, like it had been scrawled out in a panic. I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed me. You think you've won. But this will stay with you too. I always did what I thought was right. I folded it neatly, placed it in a drawer, and never responded. Because the truth was, he never did what was right. He did what was easy, what benefited him. And he gambled on me being too afraid to stop him. He lost. Weeks passed. The cabin became more than a safe haven. It became a symbol of the new life I was building. Jenna and I hosted a small gathering one weekend. Just a few close friends, a bonfire, some laughter under the stars. No drama, no threats, no tension. Just peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for the next betrayal. One afternoon, as I packed my bag for a new volunteer assignment abroad, Jenna walked in holding 2 mugs. "Going back out there?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, Honduras again, then maybe Morocco. Not running away, I hope." "No," I smiled. "Running toward." She handed me the second mug. "You've earned that peace, you know." "I'm keeping it this time," I said. "No one gets to take it." The cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was where I learned how to protect what mattered. Where I finally said no to manipulation. Where I proved, to Gordon, to the courts, to myself, that you can be kind and strong at the same time. That boundaries don't make you cruel. They make you whole. The last thing I did before leaving was hang a small wooden sign over the front door. Burned into it were 3 words: no more silence. Because silence is how people like Gordon thrive. But not anymore. Not here. Not ever again.